Joining me now, Scott Wilson, White House correspondent for The Washington Post, and Elspeth Reeve, staff writer for The Atlantic Wire. Thanks both for joining me.
Thank you.
Now, Scott, let's start with you. You covered the president's news conference at the White House this week. With all the challenges facing him, the first question was about Petraeus. So how much is this going to overshadow other things on the president's agenda?
Well, it is a distraction in the sense that he does have to spend time talking about it. It consumes a lot of the media's attention right now, and particularly at a time when he's beginning negotiations with congressional leaders over how to avoid the so-called fiscal cliff, these automatic spending cuts and tax hikes that will occur at the end of the year if they don't reach an agreement. I don't know how much day-to-day distraction it causes him. He compartmentalizes things well. He's off to Asia now for a 5-day trip. But it is another thing for him to juggle at a time when he's thinking about transition into a second term agenda, the fiscal cliff, and now the crisis in Gaza.
And Elspeth, there have been calls by some on the Hill, including Senator John McCain, for a select committee to investigate the attack in Benghazi. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid rejected that in a letter to Senators McCain, Lindsey Graham, Kelly Ayotte, and Mitch McConnell. Reid saying, quote, "I refuse to allow the Senate to be used as a venue for baseless partisan attacks." So did the general's testimony on the Hill yesterday shut down some of that partisan bickering?
I think a little bit it did. Petraeus revealed that they had taken the references to the terrorist groups who joined in the attack, or they took out references to the terrorist groups who participated in the attacks because they're afraid of releasing sensitive information, letting the terrorists know that they were being monitored. If you look at the transcript, Susan Rice said pretty much exactly what the talking points told her to say. She overemphasized maybe the role of the video, but in general, she followed it down the line.
Okay, and Scott, if we could just go back for one moment to the developing story in the Middle East here. In a briefing on board Air Force One this morning, we learned that the president will be getting daily updates while he's in Asia. White House Deputy National Security Advisor Ben Rhodes saying the president wants the same thing the Israelis want, meaning an end to the rocket attacks, and that the White House is emphasizing de-escalation through diplomacy. Now, in the past, the president has been criticized for not expressing strong enough support for Israel. So the question now is he doing enough to that end with this situation?
I think it's a very interesting question, and the first thing I thought of when I heard those comments from Ben Rhodes was recalling in 2006 when then-President George Bush told then-Prime Minister Olmert of Israel when he went into southern Lebanon to stop rocket fire that he did not want Israel to stop fighting until that rocket fire was over. This had disastrous consequences for U.S. prestige in the world, as well as the Prime Minister of Israel, who got into a big mess in fighting for weeks at high casualties to Israeli soldiers. So enabling Israel to do what it wants is not always the best policy. And it does sound like they are, the administration very publicly is supporting Israel, giving it carte blanche to do what it wants to do in Gaza. At the same time, I know they're talking to them behind the scenes about ways to get out of this, enlisting the Turkish Prime Minister Erdogan, who has influence with Hamas, Mohamed Morsi in Egypt, who has influence with Hamas, to try to get Hamas to stop the rockets. But they very much so far are stating unequivocal support for Israel and its operations, letting it do what it wants to do.
And Elspeth, quickly here on this last question, the White House has said that the president has been talking to Turkey's prime minister, to the president of Egypt. When it comes to Egypt, since the Arab Spring, really for the first time, the leader is beholden more to the people on the street as opposed to in years past. How much of a tightrope is the president walking now with this situation?
Well, it's very difficult because it opens it up to attack from Republicans that he's unleashed. He got rid of or allowed sensitive or a sympathetic regime to fall, and now there are radicals who could influence the regime.
All right, Elspeth Reeve, thank you very much. Scott Wilson, thanks to you too. And if both of you will stay with us, we'll be coming back to you later on.